Today, little old Connecticut is the third smallest state in the Union, behind Delaware and Rhode Island. However, Connecticut used to be much bigger when they once had a strip of land in modern-day Ohio and claimed territory as far west as the Mississippi. So what happened? How did Connecticut actually have land in Ohio, and why don't they anymore? To start off with how they got it, it's simple. A decree from a foreigner from a country they really hated. Well, the foreigner was King Charles II of England, their former ruler, so at least that part made sense. He declared that Connecticut had a right to territories from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Unfortunately, this didn't end up happening, and Connecticut only had land from the Atlantic to the Mississippi instead. But this is what a map would have looked like had King Charles II got his wish with Connecticut. It didn't matter to anyone when everyone was just a pathetic British colony, but it did when they were no longer. During the American Revolution, most of the fighting took place in New England, the region that Connecticut found itself in. The British made a point at burning down houses in the state. Many of the residents of Connecticut were thus put out of a house. The lands claimed by Connecticut, including the Firelands, or Sufferers' lands, 5,000 acres, or 2,000 kilometers squared, reserved by Connecticut in 1792 for residents of several New England towns which had been destroyed by British set fires during the Revolutionary War. Connecticut claimed lands as far west as the Mississippi, but they had to give it up. Why? Well, because they had overlapping claims with New York and Pennsylvania. Also, Connecticut had taken on huge amounts of debt due to the Revolutionary War. The state agreed to give up all of their lands in Pennsylvania, New York, Indiana, and Illinois in order for federal assumption of their debt. This deal eventually went through and Connecticut was on a clean slate. Connecticut thus gave up their lands as far west as the Mississippi, but they still had their land in Ohio. There was a naming debate over what to call the territory, with New Connecticut one of the frontrunners, but the more boring Western Reserve was eventually chosen as the name for the territory. As previously mentioned, the Western Reserve was primarily used to give land to those whose houses burned down during the Revolution. Due to its short existence, that's pretty much all it ever did, as the state of Connecticut sold the territory to Connecticut Land Company in 1796, and thus the state of Connecticut lost the Western Reserve, but it was still run by Connecticuters. How did this change? A huge issue faced by the land company was that their purchase of the land was of questionable legality. Connecticut claimed to have sold them not only the title to the Western Reserve, but also the right to govern its inhabitants. It was unclear whether a state could sell its jurisdiction to a private company. This legal gray area caused queasiness by investors. So in 1797, the Connecticut legislature signed a bill to transfer the land to the federal government. However, the shareholders and customers of the land company feared that this offer would cause them to lose their titles, and they instead requested that Connecticut intervene to have Congress recognize the jurisdiction of the land company. In February 1800, a federal committee headed by John Marshall found that the titles and jurisdictions of the Western Reserve remained formally in the hands of Connecticut, observing that this created an exclave with significant partial problems for governance. He proposed that the federal government simply obtain direct jurisdiction over the land. And thus, Connecticut finally lost any trace of the Western Reserve, as it thereby became federal property in April 1800, and settlers were allowed to retain their titles. The United States absorbed it into the Northwest Territory, which organized Trumbull County within the boundaries of the reserve. So, there you go. There was a time in American history where Connecticut was even longer than it is now. Connecticut didn't just claim land in Ohio, they actively governed land in Ohio until 1800. Stick around for next time, where I go over how Delaware became the very first state of the United States, and they won't let you forget that.